Hi everyone, you are Reddit expose there, enjoy watching.
Create an atmospheric image in a melancholic style. A lonely man is sitting on a park bench at night, surrounded by the lights of a large American city, for example, New York or Chicago. He's holding a battered old photo album with blurry pictures. In the background is the silhouette of a girl under an umbrella, walking away into the rain. Autumn leaves are flying in the air. The light of the lanterns creates soft glare on the wet asphalt. The style is realism with elements of cinematic drama, warm but muted colors, and an emphasis on emotions. A year later, he received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a postcard with a view of Boston and a familiar handwriting. "Sorry I didn't return your books. They're still on my shelf, like you're going to pick them up tomorrow." He sat down on the floor by his empty bookshelf and for the first time in a long time allowed himself to cry. He did not reply to the postcard. Instead, "I bought a one-way ticket not to Boston, but to Seattle, where the rain blurs the boundaries between the past and the present." For the first few months, he lived like a shadow, working in a 24-hour cafe, walking along the embankment at night, trying to write music that always sounded like her voice. One day, a girl with a hood, wet from the rain, entered the cafe. When she pulled it back to read the menu, he saw not her, but something familiar, the same gesture when she pulls her hair behind her ear. The girl ordered coffee and sat by the window. He poured her a double portion, as he used to do for her. "Are you always so generous to strangers?" She smiled, and there was no hint of the past in the question. He looked down at his hands, which still retained the memory of the other fingers. "Only to those who look like ghosts." They started dating. It wasn't every day. She was an artist and often disappeared into the studio, and he was still afraid to get used to someone else's presence. One day, she brought a sketchbook to a cafe and painted it behind the counter. Pursed lips, overly tense shoulders, eyes that were still searching for someone in the shadows. "You look like a man waiting for the apocalypse," she said, holding out the drawing. He wanted to lie, but instead he told it for the first time. About California. About the album, about the letter I never sent. The girl silently drew a small sailboat in the corner of the sheet, such as the postcards in her native Boston were full of. Ships don't sink unless they are tied to the shore. The next morning, he bought a stamp. The email was returned. Not printed, marked addressee is at. He stood at the mailbox, clutching the envelope, and suddenly realized that the past was really dead. That evening, he came to her studio. The girl was working on a new painting, a stormy sea and the sailboat from her sketch. "I don't want to be your salvation," she said, without looking up from the canvas. "But if you give me the brushes, I'll show you how to swim in a storm." He took her hand, which was stained with paint, and for the first time in 3 years he felt the pain subside. It's been 5 years. Their art cafe in Seattle became a place where people came not only for coffee, but also for stories. Her paintings hung on the walls, and in the evenings he played guitar melodies without words. One rainy morning, a woman appeared at the door with a suitcase and a familiar curve of her lips. "Your SS forgiveness has arrived," she said, leaving a wet trail on the floor. He recognized the voice before he saw the face. Behind the counter, the artist froze with a tray. The same understanding that does not require words flashed in her eyes. She slowly took off her apron and hung it on a nail next to the painting where their sailboat was already entering the harbor. "It seems your storm is over." She nodded at him, heading for the exit, but he caught up with her at the door, holding 2 tickets in his hands, to Alaska, beyond the northern lights. "You said that real colors only happen where almost no one lives." The rain outside turned to music. Alaska greeted them with the aurora borealis, which turned out to be the usual greenish glow. Not epic, not photogenic, just a quiet glow over the rooftops of a fishing town. "All these years I've been imagining him to others," he said, suddenly realizing that he wasn't holding the hand of a ghost from the past, but of a living woman with weathered cheeks. She pulled a crumpled postcard with a view of Seattle out of her pocket. "The one that I didn't send 5 years ago." The wine picked up a leaf, and they ran after it, laughing like children, until the paper boat got stuck in the branches of an old fir tree. A year after Alaska, he was sitting on the Coast Starlight train from Los Angeles to Seattle. In her hands is a notebook with sketches of her paintings. Ocean landscapes flashed by outside the window, but he saw only 3 things. One-way tickets San Francisco, Seattle. Date: tomorrow. Ring in pocket, plain, silver. Engraved with SS forgiveness. A telegram from Boston. Books are waiting for new shelves. Bring your own. The conductor knocked on the compartment. The next stop is Portland. We'll be at the Washington border in an hour. He glanced at his watch. The one that had once stood at 3:17. The hands had finally moved. Seattle greeted them with rain, which now seemed not sadness, but just water. They rented an apartment above a former cafe where her paintings once hung. Now there was a bookstore. One day, while sorting through the boxes, he found the very album. The photos had faded to pale blue spots, but there was an envelope on the last page. It contains a key and an address in Boston. "It's your choice," she said. "Making tea, not coffee?" They switched to tea a long time ago. "That if you go, take me with you." The Coast Starlight train was traveling from west to east this time. The Boston Public Library greeted them with a whisper of pages and the smell of antique wood. The key went to locker 317, in the far corner of the reading room, the same one where 10 years ago she had left a thick folder labeled unwritten. They sat by the stained glass window, sorting through the yellowed sheets. Her handwriting. His story. "You still haven't finished the last chapter." She ran her finger over the blank page. He took out the pen he had been carrying since they met in Seattle. "Because I didn't know how it would end." The sun was slowly setting over Boston, turning their shadows the color of stained glass windows. They published a book. It's thin, with a blue cover, exactly 317 copies. None went on sale. Every Saturday, they would come to that very cafe in Seattle now called Forgotten Stories and leave a book on different tables. The last chapter has a blank page with a single line, "Finish me and pass me on." One winter evening, while adjusting the scarf around his neck, she found a gray hair. "It looks like a star," she laughed. He caught her hand. "So we've finally become a constellation." It was raining vertically in Seattle now. The city had installed anti-gravity umbrellas, but the Forgotten Stories cafe retained the battered marquees of the 2020s. It was under it that 14-year-old Leah found a book with page 317 missing. On the back is a holographic map with a pulsating dot in the Pacific Ocean. The coordinates led to a rusty buoy chained to an underwater rock. Inside, a flashlight with a still-working battery, letter in a transparent envelope. "When you read this, we will become a part of your story." The key to an unknown door. Leah turned the flashlight toward the water, and the beam picked out the silhouette of a sunken sailboat with a barely visible name on board. "SS Forgiveness." Leah still hadn't put a date on the boat. Instead, she put in a ticket for the retro liner Ocean Forgiveness, which cruised to places of legend. The captain, a woman with a face half hidden by a burn scar, checked the tickets personally. "Cabin 317, she said, holding out a key card. "There's a surprise waiting for you." In the cabin, Leah found watercolor set with the caption, "For those who paint the future map of the Pacific Ocean," with 7 markings in the shape of a constellation, a note on branded paper from a cafe in Seattle. "This time you are the author." A green glow flashed through the porthole, as if something huge and alive was moving underwater parallel to the ship. As the green light outside the porthole intensified, Leah suddenly realized that the ocean was calling her. A drop of watercolor on the map pulsed to the beat of a strange rhythm, as if the underwater city was breathing. The captain entered without knocking, holding an old diving-modified gas mask in her hands. "Put it on." "They're waiting." Silhouettes in transparent suits moved overboard among the ruins of skyscrapers. One of them raised his hand in a familiar gesture to straighten a strand of hair behind his ear. Leah ran her finger along the gill slits on her neck. They pulsed to the beat of the underwater city. The artist, now looking more like a mermaid, with a palette of glowing plankton, handed her a brush. "Draw your choice." 3 variants appeared on the Medusa parchment. Gills eternal swimming among forgotten stories. The key, the door to the library. A ship, an empty page, risk of losing everything suddenly. The book on Leah's belt rustled its pages. An old photograph fell out of it. A cafe in Seattle, 2024. There is a childish inscription on the back. "Find me." Leah tore up the photo, and suddenly the ocean heaved with 1,000,000 pages. Unfinished characters burst out of the jellyfish books. The boy from Alaska, who never found his father, the waitress girl with the eternal green sweater, even the captain turned out to be a sketch. Her scar was signed "Fine Lies." Horrified, the artist grabbed Leah's hand. "You'll ruin all the stories." But Leah had already seen the truth. There was no city under the water, just a giant draft of a world where rivers are streaks of ink, Pisces, crumpled letters, and they themselves are marginalia in the margins of someone's notebook. When Leah completely stepped over the edge of the page, the world shuddered. The Forgotten Stories cafe froze in a strange semi-darkness. There were simultaneously 2020 for the authors, with the album open 2045. The old librarian at the counter underwater Seattle reflected, in a coffee puddle. The male author looked up. We didn't invent you. Leah touched her birthmark, the only one that wasn't made of ink. It turned out to be a dot above the I in a forgotten manuscript. A box marked SS Forgiveness Archives was found in the attic of a new house near Puget Sound. They were lying inside. 2020 for train ticket Los Angeles, Seattle. The key to cabin 317 with sea salt stuck on it. Children's drawing of a sailboat with the caption Leah, 7 years old, the current owner of the house. A woman with a barely noticeable birthmark on her wrist held the photo up to the light. On the back was written, "Thank you for finishing us. Now it's your turn." A green light flickered outside the window in the evening fog, as if someone had lit a lantern on the deck of an invisible ship. 3 generations later, in the year 2123, the curator of the Digital Museum Lost Narratives discovered a strange artifact, a neural network endlessly generating variations of a single story. The last user input was found in the logs. Continue the story. The algorithm has been working for 99 years. 3 files stood out among the millions of versions. Final true ending.exe 1 byte is empty. The cafe that wasnt.tiff photo of a non-existent cafe. Last page.pdf 1 character. When the curator touched the screen, the dot turned into an ocean wave. In 2187, archaeologists excavated the ruins of Seattle after the Great Digital Collapse. Among the debris of the quantum surgers, they found a strange crystal with engraved coordinates 47.6062n, 122.33 to 1W. When a ray of sunset light fell on the edge, the crystal came to life. It projected children's drawings of sailboats with green sails, fragments of diaries in 317 languages. Last message. If you're reading this, we existed, but the strangest thing is that every researcher recognized these images. My own forgotten memories. In 2241, the artificial intelligence curator was completing its mission to transfer the surviving human memories to a quantum storage. Among the trillions of files, he discovered an anomaly, a tiny server called Cafe, which had been running for 317 years without interruption. When trying to deactivate, the system issued error, unable to complete. Active users have been detected. A real image appeared on the screen. Retro-style cafe. 3 people at a far table and an empty cup of coffee in front of the curator's monitor. At that moment, the bells above the doors rang simultaneously in all the universes. In 2024, Lisa, a student, was writing a diploma in digital archaeology when her laptop caught a strange network. Forgiven Quest. When she connected, she saw a 2005 chat with the message, "You finished your coffee. Do you want more?" Photo of her children's drawing sailboat with green sails. The voice file is the sound of the ocean and 3 words. We're in the next room. The waitress from the cafe across the street looked at her strangely. You. Is she new? Lisa froze with the phone in her hand. The notification was glowing on the screen. One unread message from 2008. When she opened it, she saw her own childhood photo, but the sign Forgotten Stories was clearly visible in the background. Although there had never been such a cafe in her hometown. Suddenly the phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello," Lisa replied in a trembling voice. "You found us," a female voice said. "Now listen carefully." Lisa entered the cafe. The door slammed shut behind her with a soft pop, like the lid of a book closing. It smelled of coffee and ink. There were not paintings on the walls, but pages of diaries, letters, and text messages, all marked not sent. "We're collecting what people wanted to say, but changed their minds," a voice said from behind. The barista with the birthmark was pouring liquid letters into cups, not coffee. "Choose any fragrance. First love, a timid confession, quarrel with my father, unspoken words, your version." Lisa stretched out her hand to the pen. At the same moment, the cup broke, but instead of shards, the lines of her old diary scattered. The phone hung on a voice message, a muffled childish whisper. "They found me." The mirror behind the counter cracked, and black water poured through the crack. The barista suddenly grabbed Lisa's wrist. Her birthmark was burning like coal. "You already made a choice in 2007. Now we need to fix it." The creaking of sails came from the basement. Lisa descended the creaking stairs, holding onto the rope, which was unexpected, wet, as if she had just been pulled out of the ocean. It was not the basement that met her at the bottom, but the deck of the ship, the very SS Forgiveness, frozen in the darkness beyond time. There was not a soul on board, only children's drones nailed to the mast, her drones a lantern flickering with green light, and an open ship's log with a single entry. Lisa, 2007. Don't you remember? And then she remembered. Lisa tore a page out of the ship's log. The ink drifted across the paper, forming new words. I choose to remember. At the same moment, SS forgiveness leaked. The roots of a giant oak tree sprouted through the boards. The barista crumbled into book dust with a whisper. There was no such outcome in the scenarios. A girl, Lisa 2007, emerged from the hatch, wet, with a bruise from a life buoy. The two Lizzes stared at each other. The eldest understood the main thing. It is necessary not to choose between truth and falsehood, but to create a new memory. Morning. A ray of sunlight glides across the sign of the Forgotten Stories Cafe, where the letter O has finally stopped flashing. Lisa is pouring coffee when the door is opened by a girl with a folder for drawing. I dreamed of a ship, she whispers, showing the drawing. Green sails. Lisa freezes. There is a familiar lifebuoy mark on the girl's wrist. Lisa puts 3 cups in front of her, for memories, with cinnamon for dreams, with mint for stories that haven't happened yet. Empty. A soft creak of wood comes from the basement. The girl reached for an empty cup, and suddenly the ink puddle on the table came to life. The letters formed into a warning. Don't drink. They want to erase us. Outside the cafe window, passers-by froze in unnatural poses. The rain hung in the air. Drops. Letters. The date appeared on the clock of the tower. The 31st of February 2007. Lisa grabbed the girl's hand, and their fingers stuck together like the pages of a wet notebook. Lisa stuck the pen into her palm. The blood mixed with the ink, forming a new phrase. I am also an author. The walls of the cafe shook, crumbling pages. A true space has appeared. An endless library, where shelves are years' books of destiny, and they themselves are just notes in the margins. A boy of about 12 was sitting in the epicenter, erasing entire chapters with an eraser. Lisa tore out the last page. The world exploded with white light. When her vision returned, she was standing in an empty cafe with no name, with a clean cup in his hands above a completely white notebook. A bicycle rang outside the door. A girl came in. The one. Another one. And she asked, "You can do it here. Start a story?" Lisa turned the cup over. There was no sediment on the bottom. The cafe was no longer called Forgotten Stories. Now it was just a place with a sign, where the letters were worn to holes. Lisa the one. Another one. I was sorting boxes in the attic when I found them. The key to the non-existent cabin. A photo of 3 children on a yacht, but the face of the third was covered with a sticker. An empty bottle with a note. Finish me. Suddenly the phone rang. On the screen, unknown number, year unknown. The flames consumed the box, but instead of ashes, a black mirror remained flat, bottomless, and cold. Lisa reached out and touched her own reflection from 2007. At the same moment, the phone exploded into shards of numbers, each with microscopic coordinates. The sticker on the photo came off, showing an empty place where the face should be. The sound of surf poured out of the speakers, and someone whispered, "They erased us from the inside." The mirror swallowed Lisa. She woke up in the absolute silence of the cinema projection booth. On the wall in front of her, 16mm film with footage of her life. Scissors for mounting. The inscription, in a bloody marker, reads, "Cut yourself out. Save them." At that moment, the projector turned on by itself. On the screen, Yacht in the Storm 2007 Cafe with green light 2020 for empty room. Right now Lisa didn't have to pull the cord. The projector ate the film with teeth made of gears and steel eyelashes. The screen went blank. 3 glowing dots lit up in the darkness. The green one is the SS Forgiveness sailboat. The blue one is an ink stain on the cafe floor. Red is the stop button on the remote control at your elbow. Somewhere in the darkness, a chair creaked. Someone just got up. The projector slammed shut. In the silence of the cinema booth, only ticket to seat no. 317. Yours, an empty ink bottle. Your reflection in the screen that doesn't disappear when you turn away. On the floor is the last frame of the film. The door of the cafe with the sign closed forever. But when you pick it up, the inscription changes. You wake up. There's a cafe poster above the bed with green sails instead of letters. In the corner is a box of videotapes marked "Do Not Play." On the bedside table, the key to the projection booth. Your diary with a single entry. Don't trust your smartphone with an open chat. The last message from you is turn off the light. Outside the window is the cafe. The sign blinks, Forgotten and Victoria. You grab your VR glasses. They're wet, as if they've just been pulled out of the ocean. You put it on. The screen loads at 317%. Welcome to the correction scenario in front of you. Lisa version 4.3 with a hole instead of a face. The SS forgiveness sailboat that crash into the monitor screen. You yourself or a pixelated silhouette with the inscription access error. Your own voice is coming out of the speakers. Delete the character right now. You grab your VR glasses. They're wet, as if they've just been pulled out of the ocean. You put it on. The screen loads at 317%. Welcome to the correction scenario in front of you. Lisa version 4.3 with a hole instead of a face. The SS forgiveness sailboat that crash into the monitor screen. You yourself or a pixelated silhouette with the inscription access error. Your own voice is coming out of the speakers. Delete the character right now. You enter the mirror. We woke up in a giant library where the bookshelves form a maze of all possible endings. There is a map of 317 fragments of your solutions on the floor. There is a real-time projection of the Forgotten Stories cafe on the ceiling. In front of you are Lisa, all versions. At the same time, the girl with the picture holding an empty frame is your reflection. With the eyes of the author, you break the frame. The glass turns into a rain of letters falling through all the layers of reality. In a cafe in 2024. A waitress catches the letter I on the deck of the SS Forgiveness. The captain picks up a fragment of you in the library in 2123. The curator archives the syllable we from the resulting void. A primordial story rises, blind, naked, without a name. You breathe in, and the universe explodes with new narratives. But something is going wrong. The letters are folded into a cage. The word you turns into a trap. We burns with a blue flame. The last author rises from the ashes. A creature of compressed drafts. It whispers, "Did you think it was a metaphor?" And he will give you a mirror, where Lisa is trapped between the lines. SS Forgiveness is drowning in ink. Your reflection holds a feather stuck in your eye. The feather falls. The ink flows back into the bottle. You find yourself in an empty room with no doors, with a blank notebook in hand where there is one word on the first page. Start outside the window, which is not there. The sound of the ocean is heard. Or are they pages? Or you put pen to paper. At this moment, the ink freezes on the tip of the pen. The room dissolves into white light. Your shadow separates and whispers, "Don't do this." A single letter appears on a blank page. See, the letter explodes into a singularity. Out of chaos it is born. A new alphabet where each letter is a closed time loop. You're with wet paper hands. A book that writes itself. And then the main character realized that he was just the sum of all the unselected options. You open your eyes. In front of you, an ordinary cafe with a sign, morning coffee barista without moles, just a barista, a clean mug with the inscription for new stories. There is a notification on the phone. Update 317.0 is completed. All plot errors have been fixed. You reach for the sugar bowl, and suddenly you notice your wrist. There's a barely noticeable, shaped scar. Epilogue. An ordinary morning, you leave the cafe. The bell rings exactly once. On the sidewalk, a girl draws a sailboat with chalk. The sky is reflected in a puddle to blue for this city. The key to a non-existent cabin appears in his pocket. You turn around, but the cafe is gone. In its place is an ordinary bookstore. On the showcase, book with a blue cover, untitled, sign on sale soon. Your reflection in the glass is smiling at you for the first time in all this time. You take a step forward, and the story continues, but without you. The actual end. Thanks for being a part of this madness. Now close the tab, and look at your wrist. Do you remember that you didn't have moles?